The concept and problems of spacetime, dark energy 3. The nature of inertia, gravity, and acceleration. Like the law of universal gravitation, the theory of relativity is a theory that deals with two-body motion, so it cannot explain the motion of waves. If space is curved, waves do not move on their own, but must follow a certain fixed path. However, the shape of waves is a form that changes and accelerates on its own. If we look at it from the general theory of relativity, we should think that waves are caused by the contraction and expansion of space. However, the waves cross-circulate with the calm water surface. The calm water surface spreads widely, and as its area decreases, the waves become larger. Conversely, when the waves decrease, the calm surface of the sea widens. This is like how the change in the magnetic field produces an electric field and an electric current. The waves show a harmonious and beautiful cyclical movement that is not biased to one side. Because the Earth rotates, it becomes a three-body movement in a spiral motion. It is a movement that maintains balance and divides space. The Earth also rotates on its own, just like the principle of wave movement. When there is silence or calmness in space, it becomes easy to move. When bias is minimized, it converges into a circle or sphere. And when it is in this state, it becomes easier to rotate. The Earth can easily rotate if the shapes and forms of uneven and winding objects converge into the shape of a sphere to achieve balance. For this to be possible, the Earth must be in a space without boundaries. If space were curved, this movement would not be possible. We can intuitively know that the rotation of the Earth does not move with the curvature of space. The space of the universe has no shape, no position or boundary. That is why it can be moved by inertia. Inertia is a linear motion that does not bias over time. Space has no boundaries over time. Inertia can be said to be the projection of these properties of space onto matter. If you think about it this way, the theory of the curvature of space from the theory of relativity is a theory that is self-contradictory and denies itself, saying that inertia is acted by some external factor rather than space. Inertia is a property of space and is not a force, but this is the force of inertia, and eventually space is bent. The curvature of space means that the direction changes, so space accelerates motion. The space we live in is a world where all matter can be accelerated, and it is a theory that denies itself by denying it. It is said that this space consumes energy. However, accelerated motion is only done by matter or living things. However, matter and living things move in a straight line, and acceleration is done by the curvature of space. This is a theory that has been preached. The Earth revolves along the Sun, but the Sun revolves along the Milky Way. So it is a spiral motion and a three-body motion. However, the law of universal gravitation and the general theory of relativity are theories that explain changes in a linear or flat aspect. So they do not explain the phenomenon of stars moving in the universe at all. But they talk about the movement of matter as if matter is moving by these theories. As a result, a contradictory phenomenon of the universe shrinking appears, and to explain the movement of the universe, it is necessary to find the cosmological constant. The fact that matter moves due to the contraction and expansion of space. In other words, the acceleration of matter is caused by the deflection of space, and the bending is achieved by the mass of matter. But if we look at space from the perspective of having no form or boundary and no position, matter must change. In other words, there is matter in the universe, but the universe is not changed by matter. The idea of the cosmological constant is that the contraction and expansion of the universe are done in a linear manner. Continuous, linear accelerated expansion must have its own energy. However, the contradiction of this theory is that it overlooks the fact that no matter whether life moves with its own energy exists in nature. In other words, energy cannot exist alone like dark energy. No matter can exist alone, and matter cannot produce energy on its own. For matter to produce energy, it must burn itself. However, the light that comes out of it illuminates all directions. The universe can be operated by the light that burns itself and illuminates all directions. If the space of the universe is bent and contracted, the universe will be burned and melted by the light, and there will be nothing left. The theory of relativity refers to a universe of discord without the exchange of energy, which is the opposite of the properties of light, and a dark world, where exchange and communication are cut off. The contradiction between spacetime. The story that matters has no time, but space has time. The fact that space is bent by the mass of matter is a story that contradicts the properties of matter, and is a bizarre theory that creates energy on its own without alternating current. For matter to move like life, matter must have daily energy. If space is bent by mass, the Earth must fall into an endless abyss due to its mass. But that does not happen. Inertia has nothing to do with mass, but with time. Inertia is a linear motion that moves at a constant speed, and maintains a constant speed over time. Because space has no boundaries, matter has inertia. Since mass has no influence, inertial mass cannot be established. If space were bent by the mass of matter, the Earth would fall into the abyss, and all stars would have to fall into the abyss. But that doesn't happen. Inertia is a linear motion that has nothing to do with mass, and is in balance with time. Mass is related to variability of matter. The fact that something that has a form causes something that has no shape to bend is a story like the typical geocentric theory. Having a form is moving in a shapeless space, and we talk about space within the matter with shape. This should be viewed from various angles in terms of space, but humanity has not yet escaped from two-dimensional flat thinking. It is the circle that minimizes bias in the plane. In a circle, movement returns to its place. However, in space, it is the old that bias is minimized. The sphere rotates and can easily move through unknown spaces. With a spiral motion, inertia can be seen as linear motion with minimal bias. It seems that matter can rotate based on inertia, and it seems that it can operate with centrifugal force. In other words, it is the same principle that rotation can easily occur when bias is reduced. In other words, when convergence that minimizes bias occurs, a new circulation rotation occurs. This can be said to be a story close to the reality of gravity. Gravity is not just a force of attraction, and it is very different from the theory that space is attracted and bent. It is a story that is far away. According to the formula of universal gravitation, concentric circles can occur around the Sun. This is not the curvature of space, but the same principle that concentric circles are formed when matter falls on the calm surface of the ocean. If you look at the solar system, it seems that the planets of the solar system orbit along concentric waves. If space is curved, it is impossible to produce flat waves. The solar system seems to have field-like inertia, such as the calm surface of the ocean. This is not space, but like a magnetic field. I will explain the details later. However, if space is volatile, matter transcends time. Matter becomes a divine being, and space becomes a tragic existence that can be destroyed with the passage of time. It is similar to the human intellect, dominated by matter falling without knowing the bottom. Let's think about the matter again. Mass seems to grow by the attraction of matter in space, so how do you bend a space without boundaries? Is there a way to bend without being attracted? If you bend it by weight, shouldn't we assume that space is filled with ether? From the perspective that space has no boundaries, we are talking about the mass of matter, as if it can do anything on space, even though there is nothing that can do it. When matter is alone, it is weightless in space, which can be seen as a contradiction to the fact that space is bent by mass.